Close to 4 million rand is coming out of the pockets of Cape Town businesses and ratepayers. This is following last week's destructive taxi strike. Well, that's an early estimate from the Metro's officials, and when drivers marched on the CBD, blocking the N2, 3 buses were set alight and other vehicles pelted with stones. Well, taxi operators are fuming about their vehicles being impounded and an apparent lack of permits being issued. City of Cape Town authorities are also angry about the chaos that played out. Let's cross now to Municipal Security Boss JP Smith. Thank you for stepping out of your meeting, JP. I mean, last week was really awful for commuters, not just from a cost point of view, but also from an absolute fear and inconvenience point of view. Are you going to take any legal action against those who went on strike and may have caused the violence, although Carter and Codetta are both denying they were involved?
Monica, hi. Yes, I think so. The first thing to understand is that we don't dispute the right of Carter and Codetta to strike. You may withhold your services if you're a private entity like that. That's their discretion. But what you cannot do is try and force and compel others to join your strike. You can't intimidate other private taxis that are not part of your association. The other 14,000, you can't compel them and force buses and stuff and force commuters into your actions. That's unacceptable. What you also can't do is destroy public assets. You can't destroy other people's buses. And we fear that there may not be much criminal consequences. We're not seeing that SAPS is racing to press criminal charges. So civil action might be our only recourse. It might be the only consequences that Carter and Codetta face. And we are pressing on with the claim for this 4 million and whatever other damages we continue to identify. And we have had discussions now with Golden Arrow Bus Service and private taxi owners or other taxi owners in terms of joining us in a collective civil claim against these. This will be similar to the claims we did against Casato and the EFF and the CCC when they organized violent protests before. And the court ruling there said that if you're the organizer of a protest march, you must anticipate the problems that may come, and you must take responsibility for any of the consequences that result. So we think that the courts may well look quite unfavorably on their actions, aside from which we actually withdrew, SAPS and the city withdrew the permission to march after the violence started. And they continue to march nonetheless, with SAPS saying that they would rather let them march because trying to stop them would cause too much violence. So we will continue with a civil claim against them.
Is there any way to at least have discussions with the taxi industry and address their concerns so that perhaps this issue can be resolved?
Nothing but discussions have been taking place over months now, not between myself. We are the enforcement side of the equation. But the provincial transport department and the city's transport departments have been in endless discussions. 1,400 taxi licenses were issued during last week alone. So the claim that licenses are not issued is misleading. Part of the problem here is that Carter and Codetta are selling memberships to their organization to people very expensively. And then there is an expectation by these people who've now purchased these memberships to have an operating license. And when that operating license doesn't materialize, Carter and Codetta resort to this kind of violence to intimidate people, to try and force them, try and force government's hand. The blue dot taxi sticker you see on that vehicle is an incentive scheme that provincial government has been running with the taxi industry, which rewards them for professional and good conduct. So we've been bending over backwards to accommodate the industry. But on the enforcement side, we have not been loath to enforce the national law. The National Land Transportation Act says under which conditions taxis must be impounded. We enforce that act. We're obligated to enforce it. It's national legislation. We're not in a discretionary position to cease that enforcement. And the fact that they are unhappy about the enforcement, I would suggest, shows that we're doing our jobs. If you don't enforce, rogue and pirate taxis end up operating on routes they're not supposed to be on. And that then drives the taxi violence, which will make you turn around and say, well, why didn't you enforce it? Because then maybe we wouldn't have the taxi violence.
All right, that was the City of Cape Town Safety and Security MMC, JP Smith. Thank you. Let's hope that this impasse can be sorted out because it's caused absolute chaos last week.